Just give us 5, 4, 3.
5, 4, 3, 2.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to this amazing event with my dear friend, Dr. Sue Morter, and myself, Lynne McTaggart. So why don't we just start by introducing ourselves for the people who don't know us. Dr. Sue, tell us a little bit about you.
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my community, and it's very nice to meet your community, Lynn. It's wonderful to be here with you. I so love connecting with you every time we get a chance, and this is going to be big fun because it's just us having a conversation. So for those of you that don't know me, I am 40 years in healthcare. I grew up in a natural healthcare environment. I've never gone to the doctor and taken an antibiotic for healing to happen. I was raised in an environment. My father was a pioneer in energy medicine, and quantum science was just coming on the scene as I was a kid. And so research was constantly being talked about the fact that what we think about comes about. And if we are not healing, there is a reason. And the majority of that reason is because of subconscious, unresolved emotional stuff that gets locked up in our system, etc. So I've been a clinician for more than 30 years, and in this teaching realm now for about 20 years, out around the world, being invited to speak at all kinds of conferences that bridge the power of the mind and the power for us to heal. It bridges science and spirituality and quantum science and epigenetics and bioenergetics, and we're going to make just a user-friendly version of that conversation for you today. And I'm thrilled to be here with my dear friend Lynn. So Lynn, why don't you just say a few things about your amazingness, and if not, I'm going to chime in about your amazingness along the way.
I am a internationally best-selling author now. I've written 7 books, and the last 4 have been about where science and spirit meets. In the course of doing this, I actually started out as a skeptic because I have a background as a hard-nosed investigative reporter. And when I started hearing about the power of the mind, you know, the idea is that thoughts are things that affect other things. Back in the early 2000s, after I'd done a book called The Field, I was skeptical about it. I wanted to know, well, how far can we take this? You know, is this just about moving quantum particles with our thoughts, or is this about curing cancer? So I decided to test this, and I run an international experiment called the Intention Experiment, where every so often I gather together my readers and people from around the world, or an audience if I'm speaking, and we send an intention to a well-controlled target set up by some scientist who is working at a prestigious place like University of Arizona or Princeton or Penn State. So we've run 33 of these things, which I didn't think was going to work. Everything from trying to make seeds grow faster to lowering violence in war-torn areas. And of those 33, 29 have shown measurable, positive, mostly significant effects. There's no pharmaceutical drug out there that's as successful as that. But what really happened to change me was trying to scale this down in 2008 and trying to run a workshop to demonstrate the power of group intention. And I wasn't really sure what to do. And so I just took a punt and put people in groups of 8. And had them send healing intention to some member of the group with a health challenge, not thinking it was going to work, thinking it was going to feel a bit like getting a massage. And to my shock and amazement, the people healed, you know, and it didn't work all of the time, but it worked enough of the time where people with things like cataracts, paralysis, stroke, arthritis, all kinds of issues were healed in that 10-minute window that we did this intention. So that was a huge shock to me. And since then, I've been trying to figure out why on earth this works. And I've run thousands of them, and workshops and master classes. And in every case, you know, we have people within those communities who get healed of so-called intractable illnesses of every sort. So I thought today it would be great for us to talk about healing through these kind of wonderful energetic things of the past and of groups, etc.
Yes, it's such a phenomenal thing when we start to harness the power of the mind and the power of the energy fields that we are, and to recognize that we're not just this flesh and bone, that we have a tremendous outreaching capacity. You know, I thanked you, Lynn, in my book, which I just launched my first book in March, and it's become an instant bestseller. It's now being translated into 13 languages, I think. We have an amazing request from around the world for me to teach workshops about this very thing as well. So what we're interested in today is talking about how to master this capacity, to master the mind, to heal ourselves on every level. And what I have found.
And by the way, tell us what the name of your book is.
Oh, sure. Oh, I have it here. It's the Energy Codes, and it's a codified way to embody this energy so that we can begin to build the neurocircuitry to have access to the power of this mind serving our true intention, rather than the mind kind of becoming a runaway train and operating as its own warrior, as its own at trying to live in the future, trying to live in the past, trying to control circumstances of our lives, rather than allowing it to run out of control. We're learning in this book how to masterfully anchor the mind onto the body, rather than us being attached to the mind. We start to recognize that we are not the mind. We have a mind as a tool that we're supposed to be using to our great advantage. And when we start to understand the different perspectives there, and to recognize what the prioritization needs to be in order to harness the power of the mind, we become very effective, not only for allowing others to heal by the power of our collective, but also to heal ourselves, to have a deep access to the unresolvedness within our own system that we don't even necessarily consciously think about, but that is subconsciously driving our lives. You know, the subconscious is driving us. We don't have to consciously remember to keep our heart rate going, or to keep our blood chemistries proper, or to digest. All that happens at a subconscious level. And if there is unresolved subconscious emotion that has not been reckoned with, if you will, or accessed or embraced, and therefore dissolved, then that subconscious residue basically keeps routing our neurocircuitry into a defense, fight, or flight expression, rather than being able to relax into healing and filtering and cleansing and detoxifying ourselves and being available for creative genius. So that when we come together in Lynn's Power of 8, or we're collecting and connecting in such a way that we have a pure, unaltered energy flow that is able to reach further automatically. The more distortions and unresolvedness that we have in our own energy field, the harder it is for us to make a difference for ourselves or for others in our good intentions on a conscious level. So we're working together to allow our consciousness and our subconsciousness to get on the same page, so that we are empowered to truly make the changes in ourselves and in our lives and in the world that we would love to see happen.
You know, that so resonates with me and with the work that I do, Sue. It's so obvious to me now, since that time of putting together these first Power of 8 groups. As I say, I've been running workshops since 2008, and it took me 10 years to get the courage up and to understand enough about why the Power of 8 works so well to do a book about it. And I published a book a year ago called The Power of 8. But what I've discovered in the workshops I do and year-long master classes is that some people get well and some people don't. And it's been really fascinating trying to drill down as to who doesn't. And we just finished a retreat, my husband and I, called Heal Your Life with the Power of 8. And one of the things that seemed to be preventing people over and over again was the past that just dominates them and their thoughts like an unwanted guest. And when we started looking at what was going on with some of the people, they had these extraordinary experiences that had essentially defined them or limited them. Maybe a teacher told them when they were in second grade that they weren't good at math. And that defined them as being, stupid with numbers. And it defined their own sense of limitation. And they weren't even aware of it. So I'm so interested that you work with subconscious, because what we do is, I tend to use intention, but I use it for clearing that kind of situation in the past. So they don't change what happened, they change, but they do reclaim their power through the techniques we do. So I find that is really a big impediment. Another big impediment that we're finding happens all the time. As I say, I run a year-long intention masterclass, and it starts around the end of January of every year. And what I tend to do is put people into groups, and then I look at what they do and what happens to them. And some people are successful and some people aren't. And after a while, when I've worked with these people, I say to them, when I'm listening to things aren't going on, finally just say, get off of yourself. Just start intending for one of the other members of the group and see what happens. And it's been extraordinary to see that altruism is such a big piece of why the group work works and helps people clear those old things too, getting off of yourself. There was one woman called Andy who was looking for a new job, had 2 children, was divorced, and really needed money. And she was really talented, really good marketer and coach. She couldn't get a job. So I finally said, Andy, get off of yourself. Start intending for this young boy who had tried to commit suicide. The whole group, our whole masterclass, started intending for this kid who they thought was going to die. Luke got out of the hospital in record time. But more interesting was what happened to Andy, because the very next week, she got a call out of nowhere from somebody she didn't know offering her dream job. So one of the pieces that I've been working on that's been interesting is this whole idea of getting off of yourself. And I don't know if anything like that you've seen in your work, when people are too consciously obsessed with themselves, if that has any effect.
Lynn, it's so beautiful how we all land in this truth, and your research brought you to this from a certain avenue, and mine has brought me clinically and down a different avenue, and working with people directly as well, finding that what I have found is that there are 2 selves that we are. We are the authentic, true, essential self, and I write about this in the book, The Energy Codes, and I teach about this in an online course. In fact, I'm getting ready to start an online course about this very thing. There is a true, essential version of us that chooses to come here to be human, to be operating here on the frontier of consciousness where we are living. And as we land, we kind of splat. I describe it as this rough landing where our mind goes one way, our body goes another way, and our breath goes another way. And in that splatted, dispersed state, out there on the perimeter, if you can imagine just pouring a big gallon of milk on the table, how poof, it would just splat. Out there on the perimeter, we develop this engaging personality that is the false self. It feels dispersed. We feel splatted. We don't know who we are. We're protective in our approach to things. We get attached to the mind because it's capable of looking around to see if we're safe or we're not. We start trying to do things to fit in and to belong and to do the right thing, all in an attempt to feel safety. And so we develop this false sense of self that is protective based, it's fear based, it's performance based. We either outperform our fears that we feel when we're wobbling in the mind, or we become protective and defensive and guarded, or some combination of such. And so this is the person who worries, who stresses, who thinks they're not enough, who feels inadequate or incomplete or insufficient in some way. And it's not our true self, it's the false protective self. And so it's that self that we have to get off of, because the true essential self is made of wholeness and completeness. It's made of the entire cosmic energy. It's universal intelligence that's compressed itself into the physical realm. We know it's just a law of physics that physical matter is just compressed energy. and we are energy beings. And so what we are recognizing is that we are truly whole and complete, but we've developed this version of ourselves that operates out there on the perimeter that gets bogged down with worry and frustration, that we can't control things and we can't feel in charge and we can't make things happen. And if we come off of that false self and land on the true self, we are in service. So Lynne, when you're saying, hey, get off yourself and just start thinking about the other people in the group, what you're inviting them to do is come off of their false self and join into the vibrational frequency that represents the true self. And in doing so, you automatically, when you're in service, you feel like you have something to offer. You're not thinking about it. You're just providing, you're engaging, you're connecting. And ultimately, what we would recognize is that what science is showing us is that there's actually only one of us here. We're actually just projecting this whole thing like a movie onto a movie screen. And then we climb onto the movie screen and think that it's real. And so what you're saying is get off the movie screen and drop back here and realize that we're the projector and that we can make this go any way that we want if we stop taking it so personally. So what I've loved doing is teaching people how to do that by coming into the core of their body and breathing into this essential self and recognizing how to anchor so that they can build new neurocircuitry from the essential self, which got thrown under the bus a long time ago. So we're pulling it out and learning how to live from that deep, authentic place again.
Absolutely. That's so good. And, what's so interesting is this idea of this false self is a false self that feels separate. I mean,
Yes.
That is the real issue here is
Yeah.
we've been taught one sense of science. Science writes the story we live by, and we are still going according to a biography, an autobiography that was written by Isaac Newton 300 plus years ago. And that story described a world of discrete objects that are, indivisible and self-contained and that well-behaved too. They operate according to fixed laws in time and space. And we also have been brought up to believe that there just isn't enough out there and life proceeds through struggle. So thanks to Charles Darwin, we believe it's all about getting there first. And so we do fear that fear has so much to do with that sense of lack and frustration. And I was really interested in this whole thing. So a book that I wrote before The Power of Eight is called The Bond. And it was really an answer to Darwin. It was saying, were we meant to be competitive? And what fascinated me was there was so much science demonstrating that we were never meant to be separate. We were always meant to be interconnected. People belonging is possibly the most important thing people have. They need it more than food and water, to be honest. It's the worst thing you can do. Usually people commit suicide because, as psychologists say, they feel excessive individuation. They feel left out. And that's the one thing they cannot bear. So I found that it was really important for people to connect, that we are actually so interconnected. It's hard to say where one of us ends and the other begins. And I also discovered when I started looking at altruism, in trying to decode why the power of eight can heal people in an instant, I found over and over again that the science of altruism, altruism is like a bulletproof vest. As you say, when you go into service, people who do altruistic things live longer, happier, healthier lives. Great example was one study that looked at people who had all the money in the world, loads of vacations, lots of stuff. They were living the dream, right? The good life. And when they looked at their immune system markers, they were terrible. These were people who were absolute candidates for arthritis, Alzheimer's, diabetes, the whole host of degenerative diseases. Then they looked at another group who were less affluent, but doing a life of service. And they had amazingly robust immune systems. These guys were going to live forever. And so when I looked at these Power of Eight groups, and as I say, I actually have monitored and documented them to see exactly how they work and why they work and what optimizes them working. What are the best, intention practices, which I teach my classes, I find over and over again, the 13th, but most important key to intention mastery is getting off of yourself and intending for the other. And one of the reasons the groups work so well is that you get an opportunity to receive and to send at the same time.
Yes, beautiful. What happens is we get attached to the mind and we think that's who we are. The mind is extraordinarily powerful and is a focuser and a magnifier. The mind field makes bigger whatever we place its attention on. When we're attached to it, though, and it's running the show, the mind can become untethered and start to reel in vibrational frequencies that start to write stories and start to fill in the blanks and start to imagine the rest of what is. And when it's not anchored and tethered to the body, we move out of alpha frequency. We move out from the places where we're supposed to be observing and just witnessing and participating in the beauty of life. And we move into the projection of how do I protect myself and how do I make sure that things are going to go the way that I want them to go or need them to go so that I can belong, so that I can fit in. And what I just want to remind everyone of is that the mind will always feel that way until we connect it to something that grounds it. So when the mind is operating on its own accord, it feels like a separate self. From the splat, it is dispersed and operating as if it is alone. And when we're hooked into that and we think that's who we are, we feel alone. We feel disconnected. So what I'm teaching people how to do is to bring their mind onto the body and allow a weaving together of the vibrational frequencies of our core self, connecting with the vibrational frequencies of the mind field itself. And in as such, it grounds the mind. It starts causing us to automatically think differently just because we feel a greater sense of connectedness. As soon as, think of it like this, your mind, your body, and your breath are supposed to be working together as a team. They've splatted, they can't find each other. We're attached to the mind, we think that's who we are, so we feel alone. When we automatically unattach from the mind and anchor ourselves back in the core of the body and bring the mind onto that project, the mind starts to feel like it belongs to a team instead of being alone. It feels the vibrational frequencies of our physiology. It feels the soothing presence of the breath, which is spirit in the body. In the body, spirit is breath. So as we're breathing and bringing the mind onto the body and building circuits to be anchored and sustained there, our mind's job automatically changes. It starts feeling less responsible for the whole day. It feels less responsible for the whole community, for the whole world. And it starts to collaborate with nature. And then we, in that sense of belongingness, we switch the switch from fight or flight, and we open up the gateway for healing and filtering and cleansing and detoxifying and replenishing and creativity. And that's where we're supposed to be operating. We've just gotten caught up in a system that's tangled up and it's not working together. So unity consciousness, I find, Lynn, happens when we anchor the mind to the body and we have a sense of belongingness. It's easier for me to care about someone else if I feel okay. And it's easier for me to constantly be in possibility if I don't feel threatened in this moment. So we're finding ways and having tremendous clinical results over the last 20 years in the workshops that I've been teaching and training people how to heal themselves. It starts with coming on to the essential self and recognizing, oh, I'm not that fear-based self of the mind that I thought I was. I can use the mind to serve me instead of me serving it. Just lastly, I'll say Einstein said that we were given this beautiful gift of the intuitive and this rational mind to act as its loyal servant. And we've created a culture that honors the servant instead of the gift. And I would go so far as to say, we don't only have the gift of the intuitive, we are the gift of the intuitive. We are pure creative presence. We are pure awareness. And so we have a rational mind that's supposed to be acting as our servant. And instead, it's running the show. So we have to put it in the co-pilot seat instead of the driver's seat of our bus.
I think that's so important, and something you said really resonates with me and what we've been doing, which is the whole idea of unity consciousness. One of the things that was a big moment for me in understanding about group intention and the power of the group was observing not just what happened to the targets with intention experiments, but looking at what happened to the participants. I surveyed them and I was shocked to get thousands of responses with the first peace intention we did, where people were saying, I felt like I was part of a higher network. I had tingling all across my body. I burst out crying and was sobbing uncontrollably. I felt like I was in the tractor beam of Star Trek, and on and on and on. They also talked about many, many changes in their lives. They made up with estranged relatives. They connected better with their coworkers. They were suddenly, in love with their partners again. Or, children who hadn't spoken to them for 20 years came back. If we were concentrating on a healing type of experiment, they also had instant healings. We had thousands of them. People with, due to have knee surgery, saying it's no longer necessary. People with IBS where it was cleared, all those kinds of things. And the same thing with the intention experiments in, the power of 8 groups. And so in looking at this, we did a scientific experiment, and I worked with the Neuroscience department of Life University, which is the largest chiropractic university in the world. And they put their neuroscience department at my disposal. They were interested in power of 8 groups. I said, yes, please. So when we studied them and put EEG caps on one member of the senders with a batch of groups that were volunteers from the student body, we found in every instance, very shortly after starting, people got into a completely different brain state. The parts of the brain that are involved in separation, the parietal lobes, which sit back here and help us to navigate through space, and the part of the frontal lobes that are involved in worry, doubt, and negativity, these were all turned down. And we thought that it was going to look just like meditation. And it was nothing like meditation. What it was a brainwave signature much closer to people like Buddhist monks involved in ecstatic prayer, or Sufi masters involved in chanting. Studies that had been done by the University of Pennsylvania had recorded these very, very similar brainwave states with those kinds of people. But the weird thing was, it takes years of practice to become a Buddhist monk, and it takes hours of priming to get into, the Sufi state. Our people were total novices. They were just from the student body, and they only had a video from me describing how to do it. And yet they were transported into this altered state. And so when I looked at it and looked at what is defined usually as unity consciousness, like Abraham Maslow, the psychologist who wrote about peak experiences, it had all those physical effects I described. It had feelings of extraordinary oneness. It had feelings, a blinding epiphany of meaning, a change in their lives. All of those things happened because they had participated as part of something that reminded them of what unity really is, what oneness feels like, because we don't know this. We don't know this. We don't experience this, except in Dr. Seuss workshops, but we don't experience this that often. And in my intention experiments and power of 8 groups. But so one thing that's really interesting to me, Sue, is you and I both teach workshops where we observe, and your clinical practice observes, people who are healed in an instant. It's not, we've had people who have healed from all kinds of intractable illnesses. I had a woman about 6 weeks ago who was paralyzed from the neck down. We did a workshop at a conference I ran, and she stood out of her wheelchair. Now, everybody was shocked. And she stood up and talked and turned around, etc. I was probably most shocked of all. So we've had plenty of those. What's the thing that helps people in your work heal in an instant?
We move beyond the mind. We use the mind to direct, and then we train the mind to operate in a state of openness and availability that allows the version of us that is beyond the mind, beyond the thinking mind, to come to work. I was just looking here while you were talking about if I have these little posters here that I was just working with a class online the other day. And if we can look here, these are various energy fields of the physical body. And this red line right here is the mind field. And we exist way out here beyond the mind. And our job this journey is to come all the way into a body and have a life here. And what happens is we get hooked at this mind level, and we have conclusions, we have attitudes, we have beliefs, we have all kinds of things that limit our capacity here to allow the whole of us to land here in this physical body and have the life that we're intended to have. So as we are learning to anchor people at the core of the body in certain energy centers that correlate with tethering us in the core, what happens is that blockage no longer exists. If we look at how the energy flows through the body, it's supposed to hit here, hit the earth, rise up through the body, and circles back around and around and around in this toric field flow. And if we don't have the wherewithal or the forgiveness or the presence to allow it to rise through us because we have issues from past experiences that are stuck along the way, it creates a wobble of this rising energy, which creates a distortion in this field. Now, this person is inside of this field looking out, and they're looking through a distorted reality. And so they're constantly confirming their beliefs that they're not enough. They're constantly confirming that life is not good and that it's not joyful and that I don't have enough, or that there's some lot in life that I'm going to have to be dealing with. And so what we're doing is anchoring people in the core of the body, which completes the journey, and it allows the mind to stop working so hard on surviving, and it allows the mind to now expand into availability to the unifying energies that we all have in common, which causes us to feel connected. It causes us to feel love. It causes us to feel forgiveness, just because our system is now flowing in an undistorted fashion, because we're building the circuits to take that wobble out of the mix, and the distortion of the field corrects itself. So then the mind isn't having to work so hard, and then miracles happen. So we can just start expanding and allowing that to happen. And if we want it to happen for ourselves too, in a consistent and reproducible manner, then we have to build the circuitry to sustain that disposition. So that's what I'm teaching people how to do. But how people heal is that they stop running their mind trying to control things, and they move into love and appreciation and service. And if I have my way with them, they will tether that mind in the core of their body so that the mind is more acclimated toward nature, toward our true nature, and not writing stories to have to solve, creating problems that we solve and give ourselves some temporary feeling of victory. What we actually want to do with the mind is be in service, be in the possibility of what it can mean to be a creator in a body, to be the creative essence, rather than someone who's just trying to survive and protect themselves. So it's when the mind relaxes. And I was loving what you were saying about the chanting and the Buddhist monks and the presentation that's happening neurologically in that state. Meditation is a beautiful, wonderful way to slow down the mind so that we can get out through that and experience a bigger version of ourselves. And we have to learn how to walk on the surface of this planet in our daily lives in that state. We can't just create separate existences where we deal with a hard knock life, one that's tough to survive, and then we can't wait to be able to go and sit and meditate to a reprieve, to escape into, a blissful state. We have to learn to take that blissful state out into the world so that we're a walking, talking meditation constantly. And when we do that, it is ecstatic. it creates ecstasy, and it is the bliss that is experienced when there is chanting, when there is this tranced mind that is awake and alive and lucid, but not thinking and overthinking and overdoing. So we're finding that state and allowing people to train themselves to walk and talk and breathe from that place. That's the essential true self that we're speaking of today. So thank you for sharing that and blending this together in this way.
Well, that is what I think we're really talking about, is this sense of oneness. You know, a sense of oneness within the body and a sense of oneness with the rest of humanity that is so sorely lacking. And as you say, one of the manifestations of that is carrying around the past like a big old weight that creates the sense of fear and lack, etc. Because, you know, of course, when we're born, we don't have that. We exist in an ecstatic present state. But as we accumulate time, as my husband puts it in his book, The Untrue Story of You, as we accumulate time, we accumulate burden. I mean, one of the things that's been really interesting with me, and we also develop the lens through which we see the world. You know, that past takes us over like an unwanted guest, and it's the thing through which we view the world, and it's the thing through which we understand our limitations and our capacities or lack thereof. So one of the things that's been really interesting that I've been working with a lot with my workshops, my master classes, is erasing that situation. Now, a really interesting thing that I've done a lot of work on is the whole notion of time in the quantum sense as being one big smeared out now. You know, there's so much evidence showing that our whole idea of time as this forward-going arrow is completely fallacious. All quantum physicists now disregard that whole idea of time as an arrow. And a great example of the power of this and the power that we see in not having time and understanding a larger view of time was a great study by an Israeli professor, Leonard Levovici, who wanted to demonstrate, he wanted to debunk alternative medicine. So he devised what he thought was a brilliant study that would do this. He got a whole bunch of patients together who had a thing called blood sepsis. They had an infection of the blood, put them into two groups. One group got all the usual care, and this is a life-threatening infection. The other group were given the usual stuff, plus they were prayed for. Now, he figured this would not work at all, but he was horrified to see that the people afterward, the people who were prayed for, were better in every regard. They got out of the hospital sooner, they had fewer side effects, they were just better. And he published this thinking it would debunk medicine because there was a real kicker to the study. The prayer was carried out in the year 2000. The patients were in the hospital in the years 1992 to 94, 6 to 8 years earlier. So the prayer was done over hospital records 6 to 8 years later. Nevertheless, when he published it, you know, he figured this would show you can't use the scientific method. What he actually showed, or what people interpreted it to be, is that you can go back and change the past. Well, in the view that I see with many scientists, and I've come to believe myself, you don't necessarily change the past. It's even weirder. The future affects the present as it unfolds. And so constantly we're playing tag with the future and the present, or the present and the past, if you want to look at it that way. So one of the things that I teach is for people to go back to some of the seed moments that really have hurt them and to change their response. So we do a whole technique that doesn't change what happened, it changes their power as it involves, it changes the energy that is locked around that event. And we've had extraordinary effects with this. I had a woman who had vitiligo, you know, where she didn't have full pigmenting, and she started repigmenting in the workshop. It was completely shocking. But I think it is that, you know, we don't understand the grip the past has on it. And the past creates that scarcity of mind that is really oftentimes the source of so much illness.
It is amazing. You know, I'm going to share something that was an experience that I had that definitely was beyond space and time, and it definitely changed my perspective on what is true about time. It's not a line; it's a sphere. It's everything is here already. There's nowhere to go. There's nothing to become. There's nothing to accomplish. There is only an awareness that has to open. We just have to open. And as the hesitation that we have at opening is what determines this experience of time. Like, we are the wholeness of creation. We are all of it. There's nothing that we're not. And it's only a matter of building the circuitry to perceive it that would allow us to know that that is true. And the hesitation of expressing and being and opening and being available is what keeps us from building the circuitry to perceive our wholeness. So I was stressed. I was a doctor working in my clinic. I, of course, was raised with all these quantum science ideas. I could help other people with so many miraculous things, people that were canceling surgeries and people that were being able to change their medications, come off of them, just miraculous things happening all the time. And it was kind of what I had known to be, just because it's what I grew up with. And yet I hadn't accepted these ideas on a deep level for myself, nor did I know that that was an option that I needed to do. So I certainly didn't know how to do it. And as my stress continued, I became attracted to meditation because I wanted some kind of reprieve. And the instant that I started meditating, I started having transcendental experiences, which I thought everyone who meditated did. And so I instantly wondered why everybody in the world wasn't meditating. So I continued to meditate, and about the third or fourth experience that I had an experience that this is an image that has been generated that is as closely to representing the experience that I had as is possible on an image like this. But this is who we think we are. And this is where I woke up. I woke up at a higher self level. I could see the earth beneath me about the size of a marble. And I was me, but I wasn't in a physical body. I was a ray of light. And here I am, you know, a trained scientist, definitely aware of the power of the mind, etc. And here I had shot up and out beyond anything my mind had ever imagined. And I was able to see in a light so brilliantly bright, it was 10 times brighter than the brightest day in the desert I had ever experienced. And I could see 360 degrees around me. And a beautiful, iridescent, translucent blanket of a horizon would rise and fall with each breath that I was taking. And I knew that this was the truth of who we are. I had been there forever, and I knew it, and I knew I was always going to be there, and that I could project my attention into any dimension, any place, and have an experience anytime that I wanted to do. And it blew my mind. And I could see the entire purpose of life, of what it is that we're doing, how we're causing each other to awaken to this unity. I knew that this was the center point of each of us, so that each of us are all shooting off from this single point of unity that we truly are. So while it sounds fantastical, it changed my life. I spent the next 10 years turning my life into a living laboratory, because I wanted to have that experience again. I wanted to know how to do that. And as I did, I figured out how to that it was that I needed to come into the body actually to have that experience. And so I'm now teaching people how to come into the body so that we can access that state of union that is our true self. That's why we seek unity consciousness. And what I found, Lynn, is that unity consciousness connecting with other happens after we unify inside. Mind, body, breath have to unify. And that creates a state of consciousness that allows us to perceive the same vibrational frequency in others that is our true essential self. And as we do so, we learn to build the circuitry to sustain that disposition that transcends space and time, that transcends the personality. It transcends the life experiences that you're having here. People start remembering all kinds of past life experiences. They start remotely viewing, they start healing, they start seeing things that through an eye, a different eye than these two physical eyes that we are trained to live by. The third eye, the pineal gland, is made of rods and cones inside our brain, yet there's no window to the outside. Obviously, it is perceiving light, receptor cells that are perceiving light of a different frequency. And this is what we're working with, starting to stabilize so that we can open and perceive life from a different place than the stimulus response creature that is bound by time and is bound by space, the way that we've so far been trained to live. We have access to more of who we are.
Absolutely. And it's so interesting, too, that the process of healing is about transcending this, ironically, about transcending this physical body, this time and space body, this space suit that has carried us through, and this perception that, yes, most particularly, that we are alone. One thing that's really occurred to me, and I've observed over and over again, and the thing that I teach in my master classes and workshops, is the power of a small group. One thing that I've tried to figure out and spent 10 years really studying and examining and testing, what's the secret sauce here in a group that is kind of a fast track to the miraculous? Because everything you described, that's exactly what people talk about, either in the intention experiments when they're part of a giant group intending for something, or just a group of 8 working together. Now remember, in an intention experiment, they're not sitting with other members of the group. They're doing what we're doing now. They're sitting in front of their computer screen and they're connecting with me on YouTube or on my website with thousands of people around the world who are also sitting alone in front of their computer screen, yet they're feeling this tingling. They're feeling this blinding epiphany of meaning as you experienced. They understand the universe. They feel this oneness. What is that? And what I think it is once we step out of, and again, there are so many different ways of getting to that feeling, so many ways that are all equally valid. From my perspective, since I've been working so much with groups, I find groups a real fast track to the miraculous. And I find it so interesting that it can happen in 10 minutes. Because when we do intention experiments and when we do Power of 8 groups, all we do is have people in that state for 10 minutes. That's it. And the only reason is because we started doing it that way. We thought people wouldn't be able to focus for more than 10 minutes if they hadn't done meditation before. So people don't have to spend hours in discipline practice or priming. They can zoom into that experience in a minute. And it's about just the energy of the group. It's about intention itself and some of the practices that I teach in my workshops and master classes. But it's also that sense of really coming together. You experience viscerally not being alone. You are feeling it. You've got the energy of everyone else running with you, and it somehow supersizes that ability. I've been fascinated to hear about how people have described the Power of 8 groups when they've had a healing. One woman said she was an empath. She saw light beings behind all the members of the group, almost like they were being supported in some way. As you say, Sue, you got into that state where you saw a totally different reality. And that's how they describe it too, that state of oneness. They see other beings. Someone else described who was due for a knee replacement operation. She felt there were hot mitts during this 10-minute experiment. She'd never done it before. She'd been in a Power of 8 group for the first time. She felt hot mitts holding her knee like it was almost some other entity. People describe that kind of almost extraterrestrial feeling where they are part of a larger reality with larger beings, with other entities, with other energies coming together. Something about that circle, whether it's large or small, seems to invite that unity consciousness, that sense of oneness that I think is really the key. There's been one really interesting development that I've played around with the intention experiments. I had the opportunity to work with some special technology last year. It was in south of England, and we could put cameras into 10 different locations that would show up. So it was a conferencing mechanism. They could see me, but I could also see them, and they could see each other. So we put cameras in 8 different Arab cities with people, people in conference rooms. And the 9th camera we put in an audience filled with Israeli Jews. And we sent intention to lower violence in Jerusalem. And it was amazing. Not just because we seem to have lowered violence in a violent area of Jerusalem, but what happened between the parties. They started sending love to each other. They started saying things like, your God is my God. Now, these are people, people from Saudi Arabia and Kuwait, et cetera, who've grown up to despise the Israelis, and the Israelis vice versa. Yet there were tears and all kinds of things. And when I investigated it later, there was some really interesting evidence showing that, the thing that gets turned on when we have a compassionate experience, as you do when you're sending intention for someone else, is a thing called the vagus nerve, which is the longest nerve in the body. You know all about this. And it winds its way through all the major organs. And when it does, studies from Berkeley have shown that people become more accepting of the other, of people not like them, and connecting with people not like them. So they feel this unity with people completely not like them. And so we saw it. And of course, one of the things I want to play around with is, okay, let's get Republicans and Democrats together and start doing this. But it is all about, that transcendence and that unity of feeling you're even able to get along with people who were adversaries.
This vagus nerve is 80% sensory, which is something that most of science it overlooks. And they definitely overlooked that when I was going through school. And what we have to recognize is that we are sensory beings. We are 10 to 100 to 10,000 times more sensory than motor. Our ability to perceive what is true is more important than what we do. If we can change our perspective on what we can perceive, we can more easily move into union and move into connection. But we live in a society that is obsessed with what to do. What do I do differently to change my life? We have to learn to perceive. So this vagus nerve is tremendously valuable. There are 11 billion bits of information that are bombarding our energy field every millisecond. That's a lot. And it doesn't report to our mind or to our head. It reports to our gut. It comes in through this mind field and in through the etheric field and the feeling body, and it lands in our gut. And then it rises up through epigenetics and a variety of other chemical impulses and neuro impulses that get stimulated through the sensory components of this vagus nerve, and they arrive up to the center of the brain for translation. So what we have to learn is how to allow that information to rise up here without being distorted, without being lost along the way. And we're so used to living just in our heads and overriding things with our thinking mind that this message that's trying to arise, that is filled with the wisdom that we seek, gets overridden because the power of the mind, when it's worrying and being frustrated and being angry on a subconscious level, interrupts and distorts those messages. So we want to learn how to heal ourselves, to come into a state of love, to breathe in our cores and allow the access, the superhighway between these 11 billion bits of information rising up to our awareness to be open, that the streets are open and allowing this flow of wisdom to rise, that allows us to easily connect and to easily feel our unity and to feel our bondedness with belonging in general, belonging with nature, belonging in life, feeling like we did land on the right planet, we did land in the right family, we are in the right job, it is okay. We don't have to change all these things to find some sense of safety and health and wholeness. You know, I'm teaching in master classes as well and coursework all the time, and I'm always seeing these miraculous results that happen when people drop into themselves and find the true sense of self, not the false self identity that is just too tangled up and kind of a mess. But we're here to transmute that into something more beautiful. We're here to transmute the mind field and transition it into the clarification capacity that it's truly meant to be. It's truly here to magnify love. And we just have to train it how to operate. Right now, it's like a spoiled child. It's a 4-year-old that's trying to seek, you know, the next hit of somebody telling it that it's okay. And it lands us in a constant state of want and need instead of filtering into a state of union and being able to produce a life that is an outpicturing of exactly that. You know, Lynn, as I'm hearing you speak, it sounds like we need to do an event together sometime. We need to just,
be so great, because we're saying essentially that, you know, life doesn't have to be so hard, and you don't need to get into a sweat lodge. You don't need, you know, years and years of disciplined practice and walking on your knees and doing all that stuff. You need certain techniques.
Yes. That are
that you can easily shift.
Yes.
Shift from one state to another, and that is the state of healing, not only your body but your whole life.
Yes. So it's meant to be implicated and applied, or the application of it needs to be during life. You know, we all are busy. We don't have an extra hour to learn, you know, to do these practices all day in addition to the other things that we're doing. Certainly nothing wrong with a sweat lodge. Absolutely nothing wrong with sitting in meditation. I meditate every day. But what I really want everyone to realize is that, and you're saying this too, Lynn, is that we can do this in real time. Since there is no such thing as time, we can do this in the present moment, whenever. Always, and always have access to the eternal aspect of us which does belong, which is connected, which does have the capacity to operate beyond what our 5 sensory world would have us believe that we can be. There is a bigger version of us that is here to come out through those layers of protectivism and survivorship that we've been so indoctrinated into. And science, fortunately, is finally developing to the degree that it can measure these capacities that we have that are superhuman, that are supernatural. And it's time for us to live as that. So I know that you've mentioned several times that you have coursework. How do people plug in with you next? What's something people can do right away?
Okay, thanks, Sue. So I have just started a podcast, and people can go on my website, lynnmctaggart.com, and find out all about it and listen to it. We've been going for a couple of months and had some great responses. And I run once a year a masterclass. We've got lots of workshops, lots of places and retreats, but once a year I run this year-long thing where I put people in groups of 8, and they work with me for an entire year, and they work with each other, and we have amazing. I am drowning in miracles from what it goes on in these groups, and the growing and the work together, and a lot of the groups themselves, they become a new amazing intention family. So that'll be kicking off sometime in January. And if you want more information, again, come on to my website, lynnmctaggart.com, and you can find out all about the Power of 8 Intention Masterclass 2020. So beautiful. What about you, Sue? You got some stuff coming up too.
Yes, I do. You know, we've had such success with the book that's come out, and people all over the world have
the energy codes. The energy codes.
The energy codes. People have all from all over the world wanted to have me come and do a workshop about the techniques and teach about this bigger picture perspective. And I've always taught traditionally in person. And so for the first time ever, I'm offering an online version of the level 1 of my coursework, which goes on starting this Saturday, as a matter of fact. And it's going to be a 5-module course where people can plug in for a couple of hours a time, once a week for over a period of 5 weeks. That it starts on Saturday, and then it's going to be on Tuesday evenings. It's going to be recorded so people can listen to it afterward if they're unable to attend live. But the whole purpose is that we have 20 countries already that have signed up to participate in it. We're thrilled about that, and reaching this global perspective of how to embody, how to come into the body fully and allow the mind to be more free to do what it's intended to be doing. So far, the mind has been keeping us here because we're attached to it and we think that's who we are. So the mind has to be working all the time in ways that are wasting our energy, keeping us from self-healing, keeping us from being able to tap our creative genius, etc. So we're plugging into the online course, and you can go to my website, drsuemorter.com, and you can go directly to find out about that course with drsuemorter.com/course, COURSE-Lynne, for those of you that are familiar. That's LYNNE. So I've created an easy link for people that are new to my community to be able to find their way. You can, if you can't remember that link, if you're driving right now and you can't write it down, you can just go to drsuemorter.com and find your way. I also have a master class. I do a short answer once a month that is for free, that you can start to be involved in the answers, the conversation that I'm having here about bridging science and spirit and human possibility. Lots and lots of coursework. I'm all over the US doing all kinds of different conversations for people, tying things together about just something you were mentioning, Lynne, today. I love to talk about these ancient civilizations and these sacred sites around the world, and the possibility that there are other civilizations and influences that are playing a role here. I also speak about those kinds of things, self-healing techniques, etc., that are available for us to transcend the thinking, analytical, worrying mind, use the mind for what it was truly meant to be used for, and develop the neurocircuitry to support a different use of our faculties than we've ever been trained. We certainly weren't taught how to do this in school, were we, Lynne?
We certainly weren't. And I'm going to just mention one thing too. You reminded me to say my master class is all online, and our groups meet virtually. Although one of the groups this year, we name people, the different groups, different things. And this year we named them after Beatles songs. So the groups are meeting, and I think one of them, either It's Only Love or Drive My Car, met personally in person. They had to drive 500 miles for it, but they decided to drive their car there. But mostly they meet online, and nevertheless, they become the closest family. I've had people in my master classes who have met for years now, and they don't miss a weekly meeting. So it's really great. So please check out both of us. It's lynnmctaggart.com. Masterclass is coming in January, and you can find out more and sign up there. You just follow the link from the homepage, or drsuemorter.com, and check out her new online course, her level 1. And follow the drsuemorter.com/course. And then if you're from my community, -Lynne, or is it /Lynne?
Dash
Lynne, LYNNE.
Yes, any way that you can get there, drsuemorter.com. We'll get you taken care of if you find us that way. We'll get you set up on Saturday if you're wanting to jump in. So Lynne, I think that people should probably stay tuned for some time in the future, us getting together and doing something together. I think it would be a wonderful thing.
I would love it. I think we really sort of mesh beautifully. A lot of our ideas are really closely aligned, and it would be great fun to do that. Well, let's figure it out, and we'll talk about it.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, everybody, for listening to our chat. This has just been a chat between friends who really are having fun and learning a lot and discovering a number of things and healing loads of people in an instant. So,
Yes.
stay tuned.
We just want to share with everyone. So blessings to you all. Thanks for being with us today. Lynn, I love connecting with you. Every smidgen of a minute that I get with you is in such delight. So I look forward when we get to see each other again soon.
Great. Bye,
Blessings to you
everybody.
all. Bye-bye.
Take care.